He saved an Apache woman from a snakebite, but her sisters said he must prove himself worthy to marry her. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from.
Late afternoon heat settled over Cotton Mesa in a slow, heavy way as Cole Rourke followed the dry trail toward home. His horse moving at an even pace while dust lifted around the hooves in short bursts that hung in the still air, the land stretching wide and empty with nothing but the sound of grasshoppers rubbing their legs somewhere in the brush and the faint creak of leather from Cole's saddle as he shifted his weight, his eyes scanning the ground out of habit rather than urgency. The movement steady and controlled like a man who had spent years expecting trouble but rarely inviting it. He was tired from the long supply run, the sunburned skin along his neck pulling tight when he glanced toward the ridge, the faint ache in his old leg wound reminding him that the day had been longer than he planned, and he was already thinking of the quiet at his cabin when he spotted something out of place near a shallow arroyo, a quick movement in the dust that made him straighten slightly in his seat. When he rode closer, he saw her, an Apache woman kneeling on one knee with her other leg stretched out, her hand gripping her arm while her breathing came in short, painful bursts, the crushed body of a snake lying only a few feet away. Her long dark hair spilled over her shoulders, the beads and feathers woven into the strands brushing against the tight deerskin top she wore, the chest torn down one side where she must have fallen, the tear revealing a deep line of cleavage and the strong curve of her upper body in a way that showed both vulnerability and the force of her movements. Dust clung to her legs, her hands trembling as she tried to steady herself. Cole slid off his horse without a word, letting the reins drop loosely so the animal could lower its head to drink air. He approached with slow steps, sensing the fear in her shoulders. She tried to cover her chest with the arm that wasn't swelling, her face tightening with embarrassment and pain as she edged back slightly, watching him like she expected harm. "It's all right," he said quietly, his voice low and even, the same tone he used to calm skittish horses. "Just let me see." She didn't trust him yet. That much was clear in the way her body stiffened and her eyes followed every move he made, but the pain in her arm pulsed so sharply that she couldn't keep pushing him away. She nodded once, barely, then lowered her hand. Cole crouched beside her and examined the puncture marks, the skin already tightening around the swelling, heat radiating from the wound. He swallowed against the memory rising in his chest. Too many times he had reached someone too late, and forced his hands to remain steady as he leaned closer and drew the venom out the way he had been taught during the war, focusing on her pulse and the timing of each breath she took. She watched him in silence, her eyes wide and alert, her torn neckline shifting each time she inhaled, the dust on her skin catching the sun's angle, so he could see tiny trembling muscles along her ribs. She smelled of leather and sage, and her breath hitched when he pressed against the swelling to stop it spreading. She didn't pull away, though, not once, and he could feel her trying to trust him even if she wasn't ready to say so. When he finished binding the wound with a strip torn from his saddle wrap, she leaned back against a flat rock and tried to steady her breathing. Cole wiped the sweat from his brow, sending a glance around the empty land to check for movement, and that was when he saw two figures approaching from the south. Two Apache women, their steps quick but controlled, each holding a spear. They closed the distance in seconds, their eyes sharp and full of warning. Cole stood slowly, not reaching for his gun, just letting his hands rest at his sides. Asha, the older one, stepped in front with a firm expression, her gaze moving between Tala and Cole. "You touched our sister," she said in clear English. Nomi, the younger one with faster movements and a suspicious stare, narrowed her eyes. "If you want to stay near her, you must prove you are worthy." Cole didn't want to fight, and he didn't want to leave the woman he had just saved. He simply nodded once, calm, steady, meeting their eyes without raising his voice or shifting his stance. Tala didn't say anything, but she looked at him with a long, quiet stare that told him she wasn't afraid of him anymore. Her breathing softened, and when he knelt beside her again to check the swelling, she didn't flinch. She just let him place his hand near hers. Asha and Nomi exchanged a look, lowering their spears slightly, but keeping their stance guarded. The dry wind swept between them, carrying dust across the ground, but no one spoke for a long moment. Cole stayed. He didn't move away, and Tala's eyes followed him with a calm that surprised even her. The first bond formed there, not through words, but through the simple act of presence. The air cooled as the sun dipped low behind the mesas, the heat leaving the land in slow waves while long shadows stretched across the brush. Cole stayed close to Tala without crowding her, watching the color of her skin and the rate of her breathing. The swelling along her arm rose in uneven ridges, but hadn't climbed past the wrap, which eased the tension in his shoulders. He kept his focus steady while her sisters circled him with guarded steps. Asha watched him the longest. She stood with her spear planted in the dirt, her posture straight, her eyes steady, weighing every part of him, his limp, the old dust on his coat, the worn handle of the knife at his belt. When she finally spoke, her voice held caution rather than anger. "Why did you help her?" Cole didn't turn defensive. He spoke the truth in a plain tone. She needed help. Nomi let out a soft huff, amused or irritated. He couldn't tell which. Men say things like that. Then they want payment. Cole shook his head once. "I didn't ask for nothing." Tala shifted slightly against the rock, her voice softer than before. "He saved me." She said it in English, the words quiet but firm, her eyes holding Asha's for a moment as if telling her not to push further. Asha lowered her spear half an inch, a small concession. "We saw the dust from the trail. We ran fast." She crouched near Tala to inspect the bandage, her fingers gentle around her sister's arm. "You will not die. Not today." Tala let out a slow breath and nodded. Cole stepped back a little, giving the sisters space while keeping an eye on the horizon. He noticed a small camp tucked in the shadow of the arroyo, a leather roll, a water skin, a half-built fire ring. They must have been on the move before the snake struck. Asha followed his gaze. "We stay here tonight. Move at dawn." Cole studied the ground, aware that walking away would be the easy choice, the safe choice, the expected choice. Yet when Tala's eyes drifted to him, tired, uncertain, but seeking calm, he felt something settle inside his chest. "I'll stay nearby," he said quietly, "in case the swelling worsens." Both sisters turned toward him. Nomi squinted. "Stay where?" "We don't sleep with strangers." Cole took a step back and pointed to a flat patch of ground about 10 yards off. "There, close enough to hear her if she needs help, far enough not to bother anyone." Asha watched him a little longer, the space between them filled with nothing but the faint chirp of crickets starting to wake. She finally nodded once. "Fine, but you do nothing without our eyes on you." Cole accepted that without argument. Night settled fast. They lit a small fire, the flames sending a faint glow across Tala's face, her hair hanging loose from where the braid had come undone. She looked young in the firelight, younger than her usual alert posture made her appear, and every few minutes she shifted to test the pain, her breathing sharp for a moment before easing again. Cole sat apart from them, close to the fire's warmth but outside their circle. He wasn't invited in, so he kept his distance, his back straight, his hands resting on his knees. He listened to the sisters' quiet conversation in their own tongue, their voices low and rhythmic, the tone half worried, half relieved. After a long stretch of silence, Tala turned her head toward him. "You learned to draw venom in the war?" she asked, her voice uneven. Cole nodded. "Had to treat my own arm once. Didn't have anyone else around." He kept his eyes on the fire, not wanting her to feel watched. "You fought it better than I did." She managed a faint smile, then winced as her arm pulsed again. He leaned just slightly toward her, pain rising. She shook her head. "It burns less now." Asha observed the exchange with guarded eyes. Cole didn't push the moment. He simply returned his gaze to the fire, letting silence settle again. He didn't try to charm her. He didn't try to impress anyone. He stayed present. Later, when the stars came out in full, Nomi returned from checking the ridge and tossed an armful of dry sticks onto the fire. She sat close to Tala, laying a blanket across her legs. "If the swelling stays low by morning, we walk west," she said. "The land is safer that way." Tala nodded, then looked toward Cole again. "He stays too," she whispered. Asha's head turned sharply. "Tala." He stays, Tala repeated, her words firmer this time, her eyes steady on Cole. Asha followed her gaze, studying Cole as if searching for any sign he might twist the offer to his advantage. But the cowboy didn't say a word. He only met Tala's eyes once, a subtle acknowledgement, then gave a small nod and lowered his gaze again. Asha exhaled through her nose. Then he stays. For now. Cole felt the weight of the decision settle in his chest, a warm heaviness he wasn't used to. Not belonging anywhere had become his normal. But tonight, for reasons he couldn't name, he felt himself drawn into their small circle without stepping foot inside it. Tala lay down beside the fire, her breathing slowing as exhaustion finally pressed her under. Asha rested a hand on her shoulder. Nomi curled her legs beneath her and watched the land. Cole remained awake long after all three women slept, the flames flickering across their faces. He listened for danger. He stayed close. And when Tala's arm twitched from pain in her sleep, she instinctively reached toward his direction, even though he wasn't right beside her. That quiet reach made something tighten in his chest. He didn't move closer, but he didn't look away either. The bond had begun, slow and unspoken. Morning light came slowly over Cotton Mesa, spreading in a pale line across the ridge before it reached the arroyo. The air was cooler than the day before, carrying a thin breeze that pushed dust in short ripples across the ground. Cole had barely slept, though he kept his eyes half closed as the first birds began to chirp. He stayed alert through the night, listening for coyotes, riders, or anything that might slip close to the camp. When Tala stirred, her movement was small, just a shift of her hips and a soft exhale, but Cole's head turned instantly. The swelling on her arm had eased, not gone, but no longer climbing toward her shoulder. She fell for it with her fingers, wincing when she pressed too hard. Asha noticed the movement too and leaned in. How does it feel? Dull, Tala whispered. Not burning. That is good, Asha said quietly. Cole stood a short distance away, stretching his leg as he scanned the land. He didn't interrupt. He waited for Asha to acknowledge him before stepping closer. You're still here, Nomi said, her voice dry as she rose and brushed dust from her knees. Cole nodded once. Promised I'd watch her through the night. Nomi eyed him with her usual suspicion, but there was less hostility now. Anyone can say that. You actually did it. Asha approached him, her expression serious. You said you would stay. Not many men mean their words. Cole didn't respond, didn't puff his chest or act proud. He simply looked down at Tala's arm. Swelling slowed. That's what matters. Tala's eyes followed him with a quiet intensity. She sat up slowly, pulling the blanket across her lap, the torn edge of her deerskin top slipping slightly as she moved. She noticed it and adjusted it with her good hand, her cheeks flushing from the effort and the embarrassment of being watched while injured. Thank you, she said softly. Cole hesitated, then crouched near her without touching her. You're strong. Most folks would have passed out from that much venom. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, and she let her gaze rest on him longer than before. The silence that grew between them wasn't tense, just steady and full of something unspoken. Asha turned away to gather their few belongings. We leave soon. We can't stay exposed. Nomi kicked dirt over the fire. If we walk slow, she can keep up. Cole looked toward the west, the land rough but navigable. He returned to Tala. I can help her walk if it's needed. Asha's head snapped toward him. We are her sisters. We will help her. Tala's voice cut softly through the tension. I want a mirror. The sisters exchanged a look that lasted a long moment. Then Asha nodded reluctantly. Fine, but you move only when she asks. Tala shifted forward, bracing herself on her good arm. When she tried to stand, her legs trembled from the aftershock of the venom and the long night with little rest. Before Asha could catch her, Cole stepped in, slow, steady, and placed one hand lightly beneath her elbow, just enough to keep her from falling. She leaned into him without hesitation, her shoulder pressing against his ribs. He felt her breath against his chest, uneven at first. She steadied herself, her fingers curling slightly around his sleeve. You all right? He asked quietly. Yes, she breathed, though her body took another moment before it stopped shaking. Asha watched the exchange with tight lips but didn't intervene. They began walking west, slow and careful. Nomi moved ahead, scouting the path. Asha walked a few steps behind Tala, keeping watch. Cole stayed close beside Tala, adjusting his pace to match hers. She lifted her chin each time he looked at her, as if determined to show she wasn't weak. Yet each time her steps faltered, she reached for his arm again, never in panic, just trusting him to steady her. Hours passed like this, the land shifting from flat ground to low brush and scattered rocks. Heat climbed again, though not as sharply as yesterday. They stopped at a shaded patch beneath a leaning juniper trunk, and Tala sank slowly to her knees, breathing hard. Cole crouched near her and held out his canteen. "Drink." She took it, her fingers brushing his. The contact lingered a second longer than needed, drawing her gaze up to his face. Her eyes held something new, a softness mixed with curiosity and the kind of caution that comes from wanting to trust someone but still fearing the cost. Asha approached, arms crossed. "We must speak." Cole stood, giving Tala the space to rest. Asha faced him directly. "You walk with us. You watch her. You stay through night. But these things any man can pretend." Cole didn't respond. He waited. "You touched her while saving her." Asha continued. "Our law says a man who touches a woman in vulnerability must show he can protect, not harm." She paused, letting the tension settle. "We will test you." Nomi returned from scouting, grinning slightly. "Let's see if the cowboy is as loyal as he looks." Cole didn't flinch. "What kind of test?" Asha pointed toward the ridge. "We left tracks. Anyone can follow them. We must reach a safe camp before night. If danger comes, you must face it with us." Tala turned her head toward him, her brows knitting with worry. "You don't have to do this." He met her eyes, holding her gaze steadily. "I stay because I choose to." Her breath caught, the words pulling something warm across her face. Asha nodded once, accepting his answer. "Then we go, and we see if your choice holds." Cole walked beside Tala as they rose to continue, his steps quiet and careful, matching her pace again. She leaned against him without hesitation this time, her fingers finding the back of his coat for balance. The test had begun. Not a fight, not a challenge of strength, but a question of endurance and intention. And Cole stayed. He didn't walk away. He didn't look back. Tala saw it in every step he took beside her, and her eyes softened each time she glanced at him, her trust growing quietly, steadily, without a single spoken promise. The afternoon stretched long and slow as the four of them made their way west, the sun settling high and steady above the mesas, its heat falling in a muted sheet over the land. The brush grew thicker as they moved, clusters of low cactus and scattered juniper crowding the path, the ground changing from soft dust to uneven stone that forced Tala to watch each step carefully. Her legs held steady for a time, but the venom's aftereffects lingered, making her stumble whenever the ground dipped unexpectedly. Cole stayed close at her side, his hand hovering near her elbow, without touching unless she reached for him first. Every few minutes she did, sometimes lightly, sometimes in a firmer grip when her foot slipped. Each time he caught her, his movements stayed controlled, not rushed, and she steadied faster than before. Asha walked ahead now, scouting the land with practiced calm. Nomi moved behind, spear in hand, checking the faint tracks they left, glancing back every so often as if expecting riders to appear far behind them. "We're too exposed," Asha said without turning around. "We need higher ground before sunset." "We can make it," Nomi replied, "unless someone slows us down." Tala exhaled sharply. "I can walk." "You couldn't at dawn," Nomi muttered. Cole looked at her, but didn't argue. He kept his focus on Tala, watching the tightness around her eyes. "We move steady," he said quietly. "Not fast." Asha slowed a little, listening to the tone in his voice. "Practical. Calm. Not controlling." "We'll reach the ridge in time," she said. "The old shelter is still up there." Tala blinked, tired but alert. "The one with the narrow entry?" "Yes," Asha replied. "Good for hiding. Hard for horses to reach." They continued climbing until the land began to slope upward, the air thinning and the ground turning rougher. Tala stopped once, pressing a hand to her knee, her breathing uneven. Cole crouched beside her. "Needs a moment," he said, glancing at Asha. Asha hesitated, impatience tugging at her jawline, but Tala's trembling legs settled the argument for her. She nodded. "Fine. Only a moment." Tala didn't lie down, but she leaned heavily on Cole's shoulder, her cheek brushing the faded fabric of his coat. He steadied her, his arm close, but not wrapped around her, leaving her room to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. "You're warm," she murmured, half to herself. Cole didn't answer. He felt her breath against his collar, her weight shifting as she pressed a little closer, needing the support more than she wanted to admit. When she pushed herself upright again, Cole rose with her in one smooth move. Her fingers tightened around his sleeve as she regained her balance. Asha watched the moment with narrowed eyes, not with jealousy, but with calculation, measuring Cole's steadiness, measuring Tala's trust, measuring what it all meant. Nomi looked away, her expression unreadable. "Let's move before the sun drops," she said. "Tracks fade faster in shadow, but riders don't." They climbed higher, the path narrowing between rock walls. Tala's breathing grew heavy, though she planted each foot with determination, refusing to show weakness. Cole watched her carefully, ready for each moment she reached toward him. When she stumbled over a loose stone and nearly fell forward, he caught her by the waist, his hand steady against her side. She gasped softly, her fingers gripping his wrist for balance. "You all right?" he asked, his voice steady. "Yes," she whispered, though her voice shook. Asha turned just long enough to confirm Tala was standing. "We're close," she said. "Another few minutes." When they finally reached the narrow ridge, the ground leveled, and a shallow, rock-formed shelter came into view, a curved outcrop creating a natural roof with a small hollow beneath it where old ashes showed that it had been used before. Tala sank down beneath the overhang the moment she reached it, her legs folding beneath her. Her chest rose and fell in deep breaths, her skin warm, her hair falling loose across her face. Cole knelt beside her and checked the bandage on her arm. The swelling had ceased climbing, but the skin around it remained tight and hot. "Still hurts?" he asked. She nodded, but not like before. "You'll keep your strength," he said. "Just need rest." Tala looked up at him, her gaze steady despite the exhaustion. "You stayed with me," she whispered. "Wasn't going to leave," he answered simply. Her eyes softened at the words. She didn't smile, but her breath steadied, and she lowered her head slightly, as if acknowledging something she hadn't said aloud yet. Asha and Nomi stood at the mouth of a shelter, watching the valley below, the tension in their posture easing only slightly. After a long moment, Asha spoke without turning. "We saw riders in the distance earlier," she said. "Maybe hunters. Maybe worse." Nomi adjusted her grip on her spear. "We need someone to check the lower trail. Make sure no one followed the tracks." Asha's eyes slid toward Cole. "You want to stay close to her? Then prove you mean it. Go check the trail. Bring back sign." Tala's head snapped up. "He's tired too." Cole rose to his feet, brushing dust from his coat. "I'll check it." Tala reached for him instinctively, her fingers brushing his wrist. "Be careful." He paused only long enough to meet her eyes, giving her a small, steady nod. Then he stepped out from the shelter and moved down the ridge, his silhouette framed by the lowering sun, his gait slow but sure, every step showing exactly the thing Asha wanted to see. Commitment, choice, presence. Tala watched him until he disappeared around the bend, her breathing softening with each second. Asha finally spoke in a low voice. "He goes because you asked him to stay. That matters." Tala didn't answer. She just kept looking toward the trail where Cole had gone, her expression full of quiet, growing trust. Cole descended the narrow ridge with steady steps, the rocks scraping beneath his boots and the dry scent of juniper drifting on the wind as he made his way down. The air cooled with each foot he dropped, settling into a quiet that pressed against his ears. He scanned the land for movement, Tracks, dust trails, broken brush, signs that riders might have followed the sisters' path before the sun began to fade. The valley below lay quiet. A thin band of breeze shifted the tall grass. No horses, no shadow creeping where it shouldn't. He crouched near the base of the trail and examined a patch of disturbed dirt. The tracks were old, older than the sisters, likely from deer or a lone traveler who moved through at dawn. Nothing fresh enough to pose danger. Still, he walked farther, checking the edges of the arroyo. He moved slowly, careful with his limp, careful not to let rocks slide and echo up the ridge. A broken branch lay across the dirt, snapped clean. He crouched again, touching it with 2 fingers. His jaw tightened. It wasn't from this morning. It wasn't from wind. Someone had moved through, someone light-footed and quick. But the tracks faded fast, turning toward the south where the ground grew rocky and difficult to follow. Whoever it was hadn't followed the sisters' trail past that point. They continued in another direction. Cole rose with a slow exhale. No threat for now, but someone had been near. He turned back up the ridge, climbing steadily. His leg burned with the effort, the old wound tightening when he pushed too hard, but he didn't slow. He wanted to reach Tala again. She had looked frightened when Asha sent him out, though she tried to hide it. He reached the shelter after several minutes. Asha stood at the edge with her spear lowered, watching him approach. Tala sat near the fire pit, her knees pulled close, her injured arm resting in her lap, her breathing calm but expectant. "You found something?" Asha asked. Cole dusted off his hands. "Someone passed through today. Not following you, though." Tracks turned south. Asha nodded slowly. "Good." Nomi stepped out from behind a rock, arms crossed. "You sure?" Cole met her eyes. "I wouldn't lie about danger." Nomi studied his face for a long moment, then turned away without another word. Tala pushed herself up with effort, her legs wobbling slightly. Cole moved toward her instinctively, but he didn't touch her until she reached out. She steadied herself by placing her hand lightly against his chest, her fingers pressing into the fabric of his coat. "You came back," she whispered. "Of course I did." Her cheeks warmed, and she looked down at her hand still resting against him, then slowly pulled it back. He didn't step away. He let the moment settle naturally between them. Asha turned away to give them a breath of privacy, though she kept her ears open. Nomi pretended to adjust her spear, though her eyes flicked back once, almost curious. Cole crouched near Tala. "Arm still hurting?" "Yes," she admitted, her voice soft. "But not like before." "You'll walk stronger tomorrow," he said. Tala studied him with quiet focus. "Why are you like this?" "Like what?" "Careful, patient, even when you're hurting." Cole let his gaze drop for a moment. He didn't speak quickly. Nothing good comes from rushing people who are scared. Tala's breath caught, her eyes softening. She didn't say she was scared, but he saw it in her shoulders, the way she kept adjusting her torn top, the way her voice turned breathy whenever she leaned too close. Asha cleared her throat. "We should make camp." They gathered under the rock shelf. A small fire burned, warming the space just enough to break the evening chill. The flames flickered along Tala's features, highlighting the curve of her cheek, the dust still clinging to her legs, the loose fall of her hair. She sat close enough to Cole that he could feel the warmth of her body through the air between them. As the fire crackled, Asha spoke. "Cole Rourke, you passed the first test." He looked at her without flinching. "That wasn't a test. That was checking for danger." Asha nodded slowly. "Most men do not check when asked. They walk away when we turn our backs. You stayed." Nomi leaned in. "But the real test is this. We move at dawn. The land will be harsher. Tala will struggle. If trouble comes, you stand with us. We don't need strength. We need someone who stays." Cole gave a small nod. "I stay." Tala's eyes flicked toward him, her expression shifting into something deeper, relief mixed with something warmer, something that made her sit a little closer. Night settled deeper. The fire cracked softly. A faint, cool breeze drifted through the shelter, brushing across Tala's torn top, the neckline shifting enough that she pulled the fur wrap across her chest out of modesty, her cheeks warming again. Cole looked away respectfully, adjusting the firewood instead. Tala noticed the gesture, her gaze tracing the line of his jaw, the calm steadiness in his posture. After a long stretch of shared silence, she whispered, "Sit closer." He did, not touching, but close enough that their knees nearly brushed. Asha watched from the corner of her eye, but said nothing. Nomi eventually lay down, rolling her blanket tightly around herself. Tala leaned slightly toward Cole, letting her shoulder rest against him for the first time without hesitation. He stayed still, steadying her with his presence. Her breathing eased, her eyes closed, and Cole remained exactly where she needed him, quiet, grounded, unshakable. The test continued at dawn. But tonight, the bond tightened through nothing more than proximity and trust. Dawn came with a faint pink line stretching across the horizon, the cold air moving through the rocks in thin currents as the land stirred awake beneath a pale sky. The small fire had burned down to embers. Nomi kicked dust over it while Asha gathered their belongings. Tala sat up slowly, her hair falling over her shoulders in loose strands, her breathing steady but guarded as she tested her arm again. Cole rose before any of them, rolling his shoulders to ease the stiffness in his back. He had slept only in short bursts, listening for anything that might climb the ridge or shift in the brush. When his eyes met Tala's, she held his gaze a moment, her tired expression warming just slightly. "You slept at all?" she asked, her voice low. "A little," he answered. Her eyes softened. "You watched the whole night. I wanted to make sure you were safe." Tala lowered her gaze, her fingers brushing the edge of her torn top, adjusting the fabric so it covered more of her chest. Embarrassment didn't fully hide how much the small gesture meant to her. Asha stepped in, spear in hand. "We move, before heat sets in." Cole helped Tala to her feet, but he didn't place a hand on her until she reached for him herself. Her fingers curled around his forearm, her grip steady even though her legs trembled slightly. The sisters noticed but didn't comment this time. They descended the far side of the ridge, following a narrow ledge that offered only enough space for one person at a time. Tala leaned into Cole's side whenever the path narrowed, her breath catching each time loose gravel shifted beneath their feet. His hand stayed near her waist, never grabbing, only steadying her when she swayed. Asha watched them from ahead, her eyes flicking back with quiet assessment. Nomi followed behind, spear ready. The land spread wider when they finally reached the bottom, a stretch of hard-packed earth broken by low shrubs and scattered stones. Tala paused to rest beneath a twisted cottonwood tree, pressing a hand to her ribs. Cole crouched in front of her, pain rising. "A little," she admitted, "but I can walk." Asha inspected the horizon. "We're close to the canyon. If we make it by midday, we rest near the springs." Nomi didn't speak. She was staring at something in the distance. Cole followed her gaze. A faint dust line wavered far off near the basin floor. Too faint to see horses, too far to be certain, but movement all the same. He stood slowly. "Someone's out there." Asha stiffened. "Following. Not clear yet," Cole said. "But they're moving toward the mesa." Tala's breath reached a tight edge. "My band." Nomi shook her head. "Your band wouldn't track this close." She narrowed her eyes. "Could be hunters, or the ones who trade." The idea made Tala press closer to Cole without thinking, her hand finding his sleeve. His presence seemed to steady her immediately, though she tried not to cling. Asha exhaled in frustration. "We move faster." The next stretch of travel pressed Tala's endurance. The venom left her muscles weak, and the uneven ground forced her to brace herself with every other step. Cole stayed beside her, adjusting his pace so she never had a rush. Each time she stumbled, she leaned into him, her breath warm against his collar as she steadied. "You don't have to push yourself this hard," he murmured once, his voice low. "I won't be carried," she whispered back, determination mixing with exhaustion. "I'm not carrying you," he said gently. "I'm staying right here." Something in her expression melted, her fear, her tension, something deeper, replaced with a soft, searching look that stayed on him for several slow breaths before she kept walking. By midday, heat rolled across the land in a steady wave. They reached the canyon entrance, steep walls rising on both sides, the sound of trickling water echoing faintly from inside. Shade gathered at the base of the rock walls, a relief none of them hid. Tala collapsed onto a flat stone, breathing hard. Cole knelt beside her, pressing 2 fingers lightly along the edge of the swelling. "Not worse," he said quietly. "You're holding strong." Tala leaned her head against the rock, sweat glistening across her collarbone, her torn top shifting with each breath. She adjusted it again, cheeks warm. Cole didn't stare. He looked at her arm instead, staying respectful. That alone made her chest tighten in a different way. Asha stood nearby. "She needs water." Cole rose and walked toward the spring without being asked. Nomi watched him go, then leaned toward Asha with a rare whisper. "He moves like he already belongs." Asha didn't disagree. When Cole returned, he knelt again beside Tala, helping her drink slowly. Water dripped along her chin, and he caught it with the edge of a cloth. She blinked at him with a soft, tired gratitude. "Why do you look at me like that?" she asked quietly. "Ow, like you see every part of me," she whispered, her voice steady but small. Cole kept his eyes steady. "I'm just making sure you're all right." Tala reached for his hand, hesitating only a second before her fingers slid into his. Her grip was warm, firm, trusting. Asha saw it. Nomi saw it. Neither sister stopped her. Instead, Asha spoke in a calm, grounded tone. "Cole Rourke." He lifted his head toward her. "You passed the second test." Cole didn't move, didn't show surprise. And the next one? Asha studied him with the cold precision of someone who had lost trust in men too many times. "The last test is simple," she said quietly. "When danger comes, you stand with us. No running. No excuses." Cole nodded once. "I stand." Tala held his hand harder, her breath steadying with every second. Nomi leaned on her spear, looking toward the canyon's mouth. "Then we'll see soon enough." Riders moved closer. The air thickened. Tala shifted closer to Cole, their knees touching, her breathing slow and controlled. Cole didn't move away. He didn't flinch. He didn't look uncertain. Asha noticed, and for the first time, she didn't hide approval in her eyes. The canyon walls rose higher as afternoon settled in, drawing a long band of shade across the sandy floor. The air cooled slightly under the stone overhangs, but tension pressed close around them, thicker than the heat they'd left behind. Cole stood near the narrow entrance, watching the open land beyond while Tala rested with her back against the rock, her legs tucked slightly beneath her, her fingers brushing the edge of her bandage as she tried to keep her breathing steady. Asha moved quietly along the canyon wall, checking the height and angles of the ledges above. Nomi crouched near the entrance, her spear angled toward the narrow gap of light. The 3 women exchanged almost no words. Their coordination came from years of moving together, trusting each other's instincts long before danger ever appeared. Cole stayed at the front, not because they told him to, but because he understood without needing instruction. That was where he belonged if trouble came. Tala watched him from where she sat, her eyes tracing the set of his shoulders, the careful way he shifted his weight to compensate for the old injury in his leg, the way his jaw tightened each time he looked across the open basin. Trust settled slowly across her features, quiet as a shadow. "Cole," she whispered. He turned only his head, not dropping his guard. "You need something?" No, her voice softened. "Just stay close." "I'm not going anywhere," he said. Her gaze lingered on him, something warm and fragile flickering behind her eyes. Asha approached them, her steps slow and deliberate. "Tracks are fresh out there," she said, "but not close yet." Cole kept his attention forward. "You recognize them?" "Not Apache." Asha's tone remained even. "Traders. Men who follow the paths between rivers. They take what they want when land is empty." Cole's fingers grazed the handle of his holstered gun. "How many?" "3, maybe 4. He nodded slowly. "If they come through here, they'll see the canyon narrows. And think we're trapped," Nomi said from behind him. Cole exhaled once through his nose. "Then they don't know this canyon." He stepped forward and inspected the rock shelf above the entrance. A narrow formation created a choke point, good for funneling anyone who entered. He pointed with 2 fingers. "That's where they'll bottleneck." hard for more than one to pass at a time. Asha followed his gaze. You've done this before. Cole didn't answer. He didn't need to. The quiet tension in his shoulders spoke enough. Nomi came to his side, studying the terrain. If they follow our track straight, they'll reach the canyon within the hour. We hold, Cole said. Tala shifted slightly, her breath catching. You don't need to fight for us. Cole finally looked back at her, his expression calm but steady. I'm not fighting for you. I'm standing with you. Her lips parted as if she meant to speak, but no sound came. The words hit her harder than she expected, tightening her chest and softening her gaze. Asha watched the exchange, then stepped closer to Cole. If you stay when danger comes, that is all we need to see. Cole gave a small nod. I stay. The canyon grew quieter as the sun dropped lower, casting longer shadows across the floor. The air thickened with the waiting, every shift of pebbles, every rustle in the brush sharpening their senses. Then Nomi stiffened. Dust, she whispered. Cole leaned forward, watching the faint plume rising near the basin mouth. Small, controlled, multiple riders. Asha tightened her grip on the spear. They're following. Tala's breath trembled. Cole crouched beside her, speaking low. You stay behind, Asha. Don't move toward the entrance. Understand? She nodded, fingers tightening on his sleeve. He gave her a quiet look, firm, grounding, before turning back to the canyon mouth. He took a place beside Nomi, his posture calm but ready, his hand resting near the butt of his gun. The first rider appeared as a silhouette against the light, horse kicking dust with every step. Two more followed. They slowed near the canyon entrance, scanning the shaded interior. Cole stepped forward just enough that his figure was clearly visible. The lead rider straightened in his saddle. Didn't expect company out here, he called, his voice carrying easily. You alone? Cole didn't answer. Nomi lifted her spear slightly, her expression a hard warning. The rider's eyes followed the movement. Not alone. His tone shifted, too casual, too familiar. Got something worth protecting in there. Cole didn't move. Turn around, he said, voice calm and even. No trouble here unless you bring it. The man laughed, leaning slightly to peer past Cole into the shade. Looks like you got 3 of them. Pretty little one in the back. Tala flinched behind Asha. Cole saw it, saw her shrink slightly, and that alone steeled his jaw. I said turn around, Cole repeated, his voice still controlled but colder under the words. The second rider nudged his horse forward. We take what we need on this land. That's how it works. Not today, Cole said. Silence held for a beat. Then the lead rider's hand dropped toward his belt. Asha moved, planting herself just behind Cole. Nomi braced her feet. Cole's voice cut through the air, low and sharp. You draw that gun, you won't leave the canyon. The rider hesitated, eyes tracing Cole's stance, the angle of his hips, the grip on his holster, the unwavering calm in his posture. And something in Cole's eyes, something worn and cold and familiar with danger, made the man reconsider. The rider spat into the dirt. Ain't worth the trouble. He pulled the reins, turning his horse away. The others followed, glancing back once, then disappearing into the basin with a trail of dust behind them. The moment they were gone, Cole lowered his hand slowly, exhaling through tight lungs. Asha relaxed her grip on the spear. Nomi let out a long breath she'd been holding. Tala pushed to her feet, unsteady but desperate to reach him. Cole turned as she came to him, her hand finding his chest with a trembling touch. You stood, she whispered, her eyes glistening with something she didn't try to hide. I told you I would, he said quietly. She stepped closer, her forehead nearing his chest, her breath warm against him as she steadied herself. His hand lifted just enough to touch her waist, light, careful, grounding. Asha watched with her arms crossed, the tension around her shoulders easing into acceptance. Nomi tilted her head. He passed. Asha nodded once. He passed. Tala lifted her face to Cole slowly, her voice barely a breath. Then stay with me. He didn't hesitate. I will. The danger had passed, but the bond between them, quiet, steady, undeniable, deepened in the canyon's shade, sealed not by grand words but by the simple act of staying when it mattered most. The canyon held onto the last light of afternoon in slow, fading strips that clung to the stone walls before slipping away. Once the riders disappeared across the basin and their dust settled, a heavier stillness took their place. Quiet, steady, almost grounding. Cole stayed near the canyon entrance for several minutes, watching the horizon with the same focus he'd used during years of drifting alone, waiting to see if trouble circled back. Nothing moved. No dust rose. No sounds echoed. Only the faint murmur of wind passed through the narrow rock corridor. When he finally turned back toward the shelter, Tala stood halfway between him and the fire, her hand pressed lightly against the canyon wall for balance. Her gaze locked on him with quiet intensity. She walked toward him slowly, her steps soft but sure, leaning slightly to favor her healing arm. Asha and Nomi stayed near the fire, giving space without stepping away completely. Their watchfulness had changed. Less suspicion, more recognition. They had seen the way Cole planted himself in front of danger. They had seen the way Tala reached for him without fear. Something in them shifted. Tala reached Cole and stopped just in front of him, her breath steady but full of unspoken meaning. "You didn't run," she said softly. "No," he answered, "even when you were outnumbered. I've been outnumbered before." Her gaze swept slowly across his chest, the small dust stains on his coat, the tension still sitting in his shoulders. When her eyes rose to meet his again, she stepped close enough that he could feel the faint warmth of her breath along his collar. "I'm glad you came back," she said. "I'm not leaving you," he replied, quiet and certain. She didn't look away this time. Instead, she reached up with her uninjured hand and touched the front of his coat, her fingers curling gently into the fabric. The gesture wasn't bold, but it was deliberate, steady, intimate in the way only honesty could be. Behind them, Nomi cleared her throat lightly and spoke to Asha in a low tone. "She chooses him." Asha gave a slow nod. "She does." Cole helped Tala sit again near the fire, settling beside her without crowding. She leaned her shoulder against him naturally, no hesitation now, her body fitting into the space he left open. He adjusted slightly, so she could rest more comfortably, and she exhaled with relief as the warmth of the fire reached her legs. Asha sat across from them, her posture no longer rigid. "We move tomorrow," she said. "The trail west is open, and the springs connect to safer valleys." Nomi nodded. "But we decide tonight who walks with us." Asha's eyes held Cole's for a long, steady moment. Tala lifted her head slightly, her voice soft but clear. "I want him." The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They settled into the canyon like a slow, solid truth. Asha studied Cole as if taking one last measure of him. The firelight flickered across her face, sharpening the seriousness of her expression. "Tala speaks her choice. But before we accept it, we must hear yours." Cole straightened slightly. He wasn't a man who liked talking about feelings. He had lived too long inside silence. But Tala deserved more than silence here. He met Asha's gaze with calm certainty. "I want to stay with her," he said. "Not because of what happened. Not because of any test. Because I choose her." Tala's breath caught quietly beside him. Asha gave a small nod, almost ceremonial. "Then it is settled." Nomi grinned a little, a rare sight. "Good. I was tired of watching you two stare at each other from opposite sides of the fire." Tala flushed, half embarrassed, half unable to hide the warmth rising beneath her skin. Cole lowered his head slightly, his breath steadying as if something inside him finally loosened. The fire crackled softly, filling the space where their fears used to sit. Later, as dusk rolled into night, they ate simple food, dried meat, roots softened in the fire, sips of spring water. Asha and Nomi spoke quietly about the trail ahead, planning their route through safer paths. Cole listened while keeping close to Tala, his presence steady, protective, grounded. Tala leaned her back against his chest as she rested, trusting him fully. He placed one hand lightly at her side, not gripping, just anchoring her, making sure she didn't strain her injured arm. She relaxed into him completely, her breath falling into a slow, calm rhythm. When the stars began to appear above the canyon walls, Tala tilted her head back slightly, speaking near his ear. You stayed when others wouldn't. He lowered his head enough that his cheek brushed her hair. You needed someone to stay. She shifted, turning her face toward him, her lips close enough that he could feel the warmth of her breath. The moment hung between them, quiet, natural, without rush, built from everything unsaid over the last 2 days. Tala lifted her hand, resting her fingers along his jaw, guiding him gently. Cole let her. Their mouths met in a slow, steady kiss. Unhurried, honest, the kind that came from fear easing into trust, and two people realizing they no longer had to face anything alone. Asha didn't interrupt. Nomi smiled softly into the dark. When they parted, Tala rested her forehead against his chest, her voice a whisper. I'm not afraid when you're near. Cole wrapped an arm around her, holding her carefully, steadying her in the soft glow of the fire. I'm not going anywhere. The night settled around them, not silent, not empty, but full of the kind of closeness that only comes after danger is faced together. The bond was no longer forming. It was fully, quietly real. Morning light crept slowly over the canyon walls, turning the stone a pale gold and pushing away the chill that had clung to the ground through the night. Cole woke before the others, though Tala's head still rested lightly against his chest, her breath steady and warm through the fabric of his coat. He didn't move for a long moment. He let her rest, watching how her fingers curled softly near his side, the tension she'd carried since the snake's strike finally eased. Asha opened her eyes next. She rose quietly, her movements controlled, her gaze settling on Cole and Tala without the old suspicion, just a calm recognition. Nomi stretched and yawned, then nudged the dying fire with her foot. We leave today, Asha said softly, careful not to startle Tala awake. Cole nodded. She can walk, just not fast. She doesn't need fast, Asha replied. She needs steady. She paused, her voice lowering slightly. And she chose you for that. Tala stirred at the sound of voices. Her hand found Cole's coat before her eyes even opened, as if checking he was still there. When she lifted her head, her hair fell loose around her face, her expression soft and half sleeping. You stayed, she whispered. I told you I would, he answered. She sat up slowly, pressing her uninjured hand to his shoulder for balance. Cole steadied her with a light touch at her waist. She didn't flinch from him anymore. She leaned into his support naturally, like her body recognized safety when she felt it. Asha walked toward them, the early sun catching on the feathers braided in her hair. If we take the northern slope, we reach our camp by afternoon, she said. It's safe there, quiet, a place where Tala can heal fully. And Cole, Nomi added, eyebrows raised. Asha didn't look at Cole when she answered. He walks with us. Tala's quiet smile appeared, subtle but full of warmth. They set out together from the canyon, the land opening in broad stretches of grass and scattered stone. Tala walked close to Cole, her hand slipping into his when the ground sloped or when her legs trembled from the remnants of venom. Each time he steadied her, she held his gaze a little longer afterward, her eyes deep with gratitude and the beginnings of something stronger. Asha led with calm strides. Nomi followed with her spear, humming lightly under her breath, almost relaxed now that the tension had faded from the air. By midday, they reached a shallow valley where cottonwoods gathered near a slow-moving creek. Asha slowed her pace, then stopped altogether. This is home, she said quietly. The place felt lived in, simple shelters made of hides and branches, a stone-lined fire pit, storage bags hung high in the trees. Safe, tucked away from traders and riders. A place where no one would come unless invited. Tala exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing as she looked around. I didn't think I'd see it again. Asha turned to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. You came back, stronger than when you left. Tala nodded, then turned to Cole with a steady gaze. Because of him, Cole lowered his head slightly. Not used to being thanked like this, but Tala stepped closer, touching his chest gently with her fingers. You stayed when you didn't have to, she said. You protected me when I was weak. You walked beside me when the land wanted to take me. Her voice softened. I don't want to be without you again. Asha stepped forward, her expression solemn in a way that carried weight. Tala has spoken her choice. As her sister, I honor it. She looked directly at Cole. You proved yourself, not with strength, not with pride, with presence. Nomi smirked from behind them. And you didn't run like every other smooth-talking fool who tries to trail behind us. Cole's mouth twitched, not a full smile, but the closest he'd shown in days. Asha continued, if you choose her, then you stay. Not for a night, not for a season. You stay as kin. Cole looked at Tala. She held his gaze, waiting, not demanding, not pleading, just standing there with the kind of quiet hope that hit him deeper than any words could. He stepped toward her, taking her hand in his thumb brushing the side of her palm. I choose you, he said, simple and steady. I choose to stay. Tala's breath caught, and she stepped closer until her forehead rested against his chest, her fingers curling into his coat. His arms slid gently around her waist, pulling her close, careful of her injury, careful of everything she had been through. Asha gave a single approving nod. Nomi's grin widened. Good. Maybe now she'll stop looking at the horizon every hour. Later that afternoon, after food and rest, Tala and Cole walked slowly to the creek. She dipped her fingers into the cool water while Cole stood behind her, watching the way the sunlight played across her hair. She straightened, turned to him, and lifted her face. Their kiss came naturally, slow, steady, grounded in everything they had survived together. Her hands slid to his shoulders. His found her waist. No urgency, no fear, just two people choosing each other without condition. When they returned to the camp, Asha and Nomi placed a woven blanket at Tala's feet, a gesture of acceptance. Tala took Cole's hand again and whispered, this means you belong here. He squeezed her hand gently. Good, because I belong with you. As night settled across the valley, the fire crackled softly, and the quiet wrapped around them like something permanent. Tala rested her head against Cole's shoulder, her hand entwined with his. No danger approached. No distance remained between them. The journey had begun in fear and uncertainty. It ended here, in peace, in trust, in belonging. And Tala, her voice barely above a breath, whispered the final word that sealed everything. Stay. Cole tightened his arm around her. I'm staying, he said. And he did.